And now, Fastened Like Nails with Dr. Mark Hamby.
Well, Molly, I'm really excited about today's Fastened Like Nails.
Ooh, why?
Well, number one, we just got back from Israel.
We did.
And I learned something there that I think fits right into the central meaning of Proverbs chapter 9,
That's
our
amazing.
last lesson of wisdom. So while we were there, we got to, and there was like how many, 36 of us total, including the bus driver.
36 with the bus driver and our amazing guide, Ron.
Otherwise known as Sababa.
You did say that word a lot.
I'm going to call him Sababa.
I thought it was like a Hebrew word meaning just essentially awesome, but I just found out this morning you were saying that
not a really word.
Ron kind of coined the word.
Yeah. Sababa. S-A-B-A-B-A.
S-A-B-A-B-A.
It's not a real word, but you'll see it on T-shirts over there.
Yeah.
And it's a word that our guide apparently coined, and it became popular on a T-shirt, and he used it probably, I'd say at least 40, 50 times a day. And every time, and he was so excited about everything, and he really made our tour just
Come to life.
Yeah, exceptional. You would hear him say when we get on the bus in the morning, excitement, excitement, excitement.
Excitement. Welcome, Lamplighter. Oh, and my favorite part was he referred to Colin, who was there teaching with us, as Colleen. And so he'd be like, Colleen, where is Colleen? And so that's going to be our new name for Colin. Colleen.
Well, so here we have this amazing time spent in Israel, learning so much history, so much biblical insights. One of the greatest things that happened over there was when I had an opportunity to share the gospel with Mr. Sababa, and it was tearful. It was so exceptional. So picture this, everyone. Here we have this tour guide who speaks 6 languages. He was a molecular biologist, studies the scriptures, knows theology.
Super in love with history and nature, creation. He's from a background where both of his parents were Jewish, and so he grew up, practicing the traditions, and he's no longer practicing, but still has this incredibly deep knowledge of their history.
And I think he knew the Bible more than anyone I've ever known before. So he started off day one telling us some amazing things. Number one, that Jesus was God. Okay? And I remember Jesus telling Peter, no man has revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. Not only did he believe that Jesus was God, he believed Jesus was the Messiah, Savior of the world. He believed that, only by the blood of Christ could a person be saved. He believed that God came to this world in human form through Jesus, and that God was this infinite God. And then he explained something incredible with the crying out in prayer at the Gethsemane when he cried out in anguish and was sweating, as it were, great drops of blood. And he explained to us that was infinity, that God, the God of the universe, the God who's infinite, right? That at that moment, it wasn't a separation between the Father and Son. That's how I've always thought of it, that the Father and the Son were somehow separating, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? But he explained it in a different way that I thought was incredible. It was the Father and Son speaking to each other, back and forth. Not that they were being separated, but that they were saying, like, I have to do this so that others can have life. I'm doing this so that others can enjoy us. And it was spectacular. So the reason I give this segue into this lesson is because that's how lesson in chapter 9, lesson 12, begins. In the middle. Now, we've already done the first 10 verses, first 9 verses.
Yep.
We're going to start today with verse 10 of chapter 9. And it says this, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Now, we know that in chapter 1, verse 7, it says the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge.
Yeah.
And then we've talked about that in order to go from knowledge to wisdom, the Son, the Father is giving the Son 12 lessons. And these lessons are essential if he is going to obtain the wisdom in chapter 9. So the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge in chapter 1. All the way to chapter 9, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. So the Father's teaching the Son, you have to pass these 11 tests so that you can get to this 12th one, which is the most important. Not only obtaining wisdom, but watch what it says next. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is discernment.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's it. He lands the central, most important meaning in all of these lessons are the lessons of wisdom, are the lessons that are going to keep you from folly, from a life, the foolish ways of life. Are these lessons, are you going to learn the things that God wants you to learn so that it leads you to a true knowledge of the Holy One, who is Jesus himself. Okay? Because if you have that, you have everything.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so as soon as the Father gives the Son this ultimate goal, Son, this is what you're after. You're after knowing the Holy One. If you know the Holy One, then you have true discernment, because now Jesus guides you. He lives inside of you. You can ask him for wisdom, who he does not withhold it. He gives you everything you need to make decisions. Therefore, in chapter 9, verse 11, the very next verse, the Father's going to take his Son on a journey of what he's going to face even when he has the discernment of the Holy One. And he needs to discern what happens when he faces the complex assaults of folly. And Molly, before we go into these, stealth operations of folly, it should be brought out that the Son is not mentioned in chapter 9. So the Father's writing all of this for the Son's, for his improvement, for his knowledge and his spiritual growth. But the focus in chapter 9 is to the simple one. The fools and the scorners are being left out in chapter 9, but the simple are not. They get one last opportunity. And so the Son is going to be able to read this and learn what happens when the simple turn away and don't turn to wisdom.
Yeah, it is interesting because last lesson we were talking about how wisdom is going after the simple and for those who lack understanding. And so it's kind of like a last call here. She's already extended offers to the others. And what's even interesting in the opposite way is that wisdom, those who have wisdom and discernment, she's not inviting them anymore because they're already there. And so folly, now at this point, it's too late for her to get those who have wisdom and discernment. And she already has those who are mockers and fools. And so she's down to her last call too. And she's targeting the same people that wisdom is targeting.
That's good. Okay, let's look at it. Verse 11 starts off by saying, "For by me your days will be multiplied and the years of your life will be increased." Okay, that's kind of cool. That's gives you a little bit of motivation. You get multiplied days and increased years of life.
And that's reminiscent of some of the themes throughout the other lessons too, right? When we were talking about wisdom's benefits.
A lot of people would take these things as general pithy statements and that they don't really have a lot of meaning to them. But boy, if you think about it, I'm 67 years old. Yeah. Now, that doesn't mean that everyone is promised a long life. But generally speaking, those who follow the ways of wisdom will have a long life. Now, God may assign someone to die early. Those are God's divine assignments. Peter died much earlier than the Apostle John died. John, he was living up to 90 A.D., in the island of Patmos. Peter, according to tradition, he died on a upside-down cross, watching his wife get crucified first.
That's terrible.
Andrew was crucified on an X-shaped cross. James was beheaded, the Lord's half-brother. And then John, according to tradition, was placed in a cauldron of boiling oil, and he didn't die. And then he lived the remainder of his life. He lived, with probably some extreme, pain. And on the island of Patmos, that's where he wrote the books of 1st, 2nd, 3rd John and the book of Revelation. Yeah. So God had different assignments for different people. But generally speaking, if you follow the ways of wisdom, she promises you a long life, multiplied days and long life. And not only that, if, verse 12, you be wise, you should be wise for yourself. But if you scorn, then you alone shall bear it. Now, what does it mean to be wise to yourself? And if you scorn, you alone will bear it. What does that mean?
It kind of seems like, the choices that you make in life, it will, obviously we know it influences other people, but it seems like here it's going to be at the end of the day, it's going to be you and God. You're going to be accountable for the decisions that you made, whether they were wise or foolish. So if you're wise, who's going to get the wise benefits? You are.
Got it.
But if
that's
you're
it.
Foolish or you scoff, who are you ultimately hurting? It's
yourself.
Yeah,
so it's actually, this is a contrast. If you're wise, you benefit from the wisdom. If you're a scorner, then it actually hurts you.
It's kind of like that verse, slightly on topic, slightly off topic. But there's a verse in Proverbs that says, if you are generous, or he who is generous refreshes himself, so he who refreshes others will refresh himself, which I think is interesting because who is he refreshing? He's refreshing others, but who does that refresh?
Himself,
yeah.
Oh, that's really good, Mal. Nice. Okay, verse 13. You ready? This is where it starts.
I am so ready.
A foolish woman is clamorous, or she's loud. She's simple and knows nothing.
Oh, she is simple.
Interesting.
That's interesting. Yeah, and she lacks knowledge.
And what does she know? Yeah, well, it says she lacks knowledge and she knows nothing. They always give the appearance of knowing a lot. When I'm talking to people, I'm talking about some theological, piece. And people say, well, I think, and I'm always thinking like, well, I don't really care what you think. Because what does God think? That's what we got to ask ourselves. And you got to look at the Word. What does the Word say? A foolish woman is loud. Have you ever been around people that just are loud? Not just women, but men as well. Business meetings, church business meetings, when, I don't know what it is, even pastors that seem to be pulpit pounders, Some people think that they've got to be loud in order to get their message across, but you really don't. You really need to be meek. You need to be confident of what you're saying, and then you need to let your words be few, the Bible says, and then you need to mean what you say and say what you mean. Of course, I've arrived in all of those areas.
Well, of course. Well, I think it goes through another theme that we've seen a lot in Proverbs, which is a wise person or someone who is on the path to pursuing wisdom thinks things through. And so if you're stopping or pausing to think things through and not just like doing whatever's next or just kind of, making foolish decisions on the fly, then you're not going to be loud. You're going to be thoughtful. You're going to have this almost reserve to you.
I could do that when there's no pressure on me. But put pressure on me where, I have to defend myself. And for some reason, I'm like, why did I say that? Jesus said very little.
Oh, if, someone is instantly like saying something mean, at least to me, my gut reaction is instantly a retort. And so then it's like, oh man, like if I had just been quiet, I would have been able to have a better testimony.
Yeah, when Jesus was being falsely accused, he said very little. In fact, sometimes he said nothing. I think it was Pilate, like, don't you have anything to say?
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
That is absolutely incredible.
Okay, here we go. Verse 14. After we learn about the loudness of this foolish woman and how she's so simple and knows nothing, it says this. She sits at the door of her house on the seat in the high places of the city. What does that remind you of in contrast?
Wisdom. Wisdom is in the highest place of the city.
Yeah. The only difference is wisdom was working. She'd hewn out her 7 pillars. She had killed her beast, made her prime rib. She mixed her wine, baked her bread, set her table, sent out her maidens. Wisdom does all the work for us. And that's why salvation is free, because God's done all the work. But on the reverse end, Folly, the counterfeit, what is she doing? Sitting, doing nothing, knowing nothing, doing nothing, and she sits there where?
In the highest places of the city.
What does that mean?
Where the people are.
And where the people are notable and where she can appear to be somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So let's talk about high places for a second. So we just got back from Israel, and we were at Tel Dan, and what did we see there?
Well, we saw in Tel Dan one of the places where, so there were 2 golden calves that were made. One of them was sent to Tel Dan, and I don't remember where the other one went. But we actually saw the altar where it would have been a high place of the city.
In the high places,
worshipped.
Yeah, what did they have in the high places? False gods.
Idolatry, yeah.
Yeah. Golden calves and...
Yeah, because I think the Bible story went something like the people were traveling to Jerusalem to worship God, and then one of the kings was like, hey, we don't need to travel all of this way. It's just annoying. He's like, I'm going to put 2 golden calves, and you're going to worship the Lord through this golden idol. And then we read later in the Bible, they were destroyed, and there was actually a place where the altar was destroyed, which was really cool to see. That was right at the very beginning of the opening of the Cont'd.
Okay, so the king, Jeroboam, he was the first one to do this, and he did it because he was afraid that if the people went to Jerusalem to worship, that he would lose his rule over the 10 tribes. And so the 10 tribes had to go quite a distance. I mean, not too bad. It would have been 1 to 2 to 3 days journey at the most. And while they were there for Passover, they would have spent a week there. And Jeroboam, as the kingdom had split between Rehoboam, Solomon's son that took over, and then Jeroboam, God gave Jeroboam 10 tribes. Rehoboam had 1 tribe, or had 2 tribes. And then he was afraid he was going to lose his rule over them. So he said to the people, you don't have to go to Jerusalem anymore. I'm going to put a god that represents the God of heaven. I'll make this calf over here, and you can worship the calf, which represents our God. And you guys in this group over here, Simeon and Ephraim, Manasseh, you guys can worship over here. And then all you guys on the other side, I'll put another one over there. So you have to travel very little. And that was his scheme, and it worked. It worked until until Babylon comes to destroy Israel. The high places are still there. And so every great king, like Josiah, Hezekiah, these great kings, they go, and what do they do as soon as they take over? They destroy the high places. But they're only destroying the high places, guess where?
Where?
In Judah.
Oh.
The high places not only were where Jeroboam placed them in the 10 tribes, the high places came all the way down into the southern tribes, into Judah and Benjamin.
Oh, wow.
And so they were no longer even going to Jerusalem.
Wait. So what does that have to do with wisdom and folly?
Look where Folly is. She's at one of the high places.
Wisdom's also in the high places, too.
Wisdom, though, is calling people to come out. And so what is happening here, so I wouldn't call this a high place like it was the high place of Jeroboam. But it's the position where people are being attracted to. This is the high place in Israel. A high place is where people are gathered, where they come together. There's a reason that you come to a high place. It's a gathering place. It's not always a place of idolatry, but the fact that it's a high place that attracts other people and causes people to come together. For example, New York City. New York City would be considered a high place, especially over on the stock market area. All the business people, all the money's passing back and forth over there. So you've got all these leaders around the world, all these business people trying to get rich quick. They're all coming to that particular high place. It's a place that draws people together in one place.
That's crazy. So how is that relevant to us listeners today? Because I know I'm not often in New York City or in a high place. And so this is written, from father to son or from, in a very personal intimate way. So then what can be a takeaway for it? Like wisdom and folly are crying out. What would that look like for us?
Okay, so again, wisdom's done all the work and wisdom's calling people out. Okay?
I thought she was inviting them into her home.
Wisdom? Yeah, not at the high place. She goes out to find people. That's where she's getting people.
She goes out to bring people in.
Yes, and she goes to the highest places, okay, where people are gathering. And she's calling them out to come to her place where she's, the 7 pillars, where she has done all this work for them. Folly, on the other hand, is sitting in the high place. And she's calling people to her to stay there.
It's interesting that Folly's home is in the highest places. I wonder if there's something like, I don't know, because obviously Jesus and God, they've let Satan have control over this world if Folly's in control here and now. But then also, because, like you were saying with the kings and everything, there's just this constant, God is reigning God's always reigning, but, the high places are filled with idolatry or it's filled with worship. And so there's this contrast between good king, bad king, good king, bad king, and so on and so forth.
I don't think the high places are ever filled with worship.
Really?
Yeah, they're always idolatrous.
Interesting.
Yeah, so wisdom is at the highest places in the market, okay, where people are gathering. And Folly is sitting there, inviting people to come with her. I don't think that's Folly's house. I think that's one of many places where Folly invites people to trap them. So it's one place. Folly's home is a different place where she invites people, where in the very basement is the depths of hell, where she opens the door to keep people there forever. As the Bible says that many mighty men are in her grasp, have been placed into the depths of hell. But you asked a question earlier, and you said, how is this significant for us today?
Right.
So here it is. The purpose of the high places was to make it easy for people to be able to not worship God anymore where God had required it, to make things easy for people. Today, we have very low church attendance, for example. The New Testament says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together as the manner such is. But all the more, as the day approaches, provoke one another to love and good works. And if you don't have the assembling of yourselves together, where we're supposed to be, where God has set up a place of congregating, a place of assembling, a place of meeting together. God has set up a place today, a place to meet together. But what happens, Molly, is that Folly, even today, what she's done is she has placed all kinds of easy places to worship. You can stay home. You don't have to go to church. You know what? There was one church that said, you know what? We're going to go skiing on Sunday. And we're going to meet with the skiers while we're skiing. And they stopped their church services. They were meeting up in the ski lodge. Others are doing something similar. They're creating their own convenient ways to worship today. And all of a sudden, what happens is we remove ourselves from God's design of the church, the simple church, the local church, where God has designed for people to come to it, to hear the gospel, to hear Bible teaching, to meet with one another in fellowship, to provoke one another to love and good works. And all of a sudden, we have this day in which we live where the Folly is now making easy access for us to do our own thing so that we're no longer together anymore. Can you see that? Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know if this relates exactly to Proverbs chapter 9, but it mentioned the high places, and I think that it's fitting for us to at least talk about, what's going on in our culture today, where people are no longer meeting together like they once did. There used to be Wednesday night Bible study. There used to be Sunday night Bible study. Many churches today have done away with Wednesday night prayer meeting, done away with Sunday night meetings, and it's just one service a week. When we were having 3 services a week, and people were stronger spiritually back then.
Do you think Folly can go after people who are saved then?
That's a great, great question.
Because the examples you were using were people who are going to church. I know, obviously, that doesn't make you a Christian, but it sounds like these are being implemented in places where, at least pastors and deacons and people who are going in the assemblies of the congregation, they should be Christ followers. So if what you're saying is true and Folly's being integrated into churches, would those people be saved?
I think people could be saved, obviously. I think if you read the 7 churches in the book of Revelation, you'll see that these people, many of them were saved, but Satan, Folly, had corrupted so much of those churches. These people were following a completely different way than what God had prescribed. And Molly, we started this podcast with telling people about Mr. Sababa in Israel. Mr. Sababa in Israel, we loved him dearly. He loved us dearly. He believed that Jesus was the Messiah. He believed Jesus was God. He believed that without the shedding of his blood, there'd be no remission of sins. He believed all of those things, yet he was not saved.
Yet he admitted humbly and honestly that he was not a believer. That's different than going to church and all of that.
But that goes to show you that people can have that kind of knowledge.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, but I don't think someone like that would be a pastor.
Oh, yeah. If you read our book, Fastened Like Nails, volume 1, 2, and 3, almost every single one of those great men of God, from Whitefield to Wesley to you name it, those men, all those men were pastoring churches, and not one of them was actually saved. They got saved after they were reading the Bible in ministry. So I think churches are filled with unsaved pastors, filled with unsaved deacons, filled with unsaved members. People have to just come to a place in their life where they examine themselves. And what does Paul say? Examine yourself, test yourself, see whether or not you're in the faith. And then he asks the question, does Jesus Christ live in you? That question is a legitimate question for every person who claims to be a believer. And our tour guide, when I asked him that question on day one, said, I have to be honest with you. I have it in my head, but not in my heart. That's a very honest answer. And you can't save yourself, but you can ask God, what's happening to me? I don't have a real love for you, and I don't have a real conviction over my sin. And so, God, only you can do that. And Lord, I confess that I know you in my mind, but not in my heart. And so, Lord, I need you to make that connection. Help me to know what's missing. Lord, save me. I can't save myself. I think when we become honest with God, whatever it is that's holding us back, God says that if any man comes to me, I will in no wise turn away. So God has some promises that he's not going to turn you away, but we got to figure out what is it that's missing, that's causing us to have that disconnect from our head and our heart. Okay, let's onward. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay, here we go. Next verse. What is she doing? Not only does she sit at the door of her house. Oh, Molly, it does say the door of her house. I didn't see that before. It is her house. Whoa. Is that what you were saying before? Wow. Okay, so she's got her own house on the high places of the city. And what is she doing? She's calling out passengers who go right on their ways. Do you know what that means?
We talked about this in one of the previous recordings of this podcast.
You mean one of 3?
Yeah, this is actually number 4 of us recording Wisdom Lesson number 12.
We've not been able to finish this lesson.
No.
Wonder why.
I don't know. Well, I mean, we were trying to record it right before Israel, and we were trying to get 2 weeks caught up on work. So we were in here recording at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
And our brains were really
I don't know if our brains are here even today. I think my soul is somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean.
Yeah, we just got back from Israel yesterday, and so
it was yesterday.
And so we're all pretty jet lagged.
Yeah. So when I got back yesterday, I had to drive all the way to the city to get my computer fixed, and I got back here. I was fighting staying awake. I got to the red light in town.
Yep.
And I just wanted to close my eyes for a second. So I knew I put it in park. And I don't know how long I was there, but I heard people tooting their horns and woke me up. Now embarrassing.
That's terrible.
Okay, so here she's calling passengers who go right on their ways.
Yeah. Okay, so we kind of talked about this idea of there's this, it's almost like a school of fish. And so fish are just kind of like going on their way in their course or whatever. And it's kind of like mind numbing. So it seems at first when you're just reading it being like, but those who go straight on their way, they're like, they're moving forward or whatever. But if you're just like clicking in and kind of doing the mindless, going through the motions, moving forward, then, I mean, that's not anything to brag about.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're not thinking of anything.
They're just
day
slipping
day.
In mainstream.
Yep. Day to day, doing the same routine, day after day after day, and they're not thinking like, why am I here? That's a legitimate question that everyone should ask themselves.
Yeah.
Why am I here? What purpose has God created? For what purpose has God created me?
Absolutely.
And God has always created us for a divine design, a reason that we exist. It's not just to go to work every day and plan out a vacation. I mean, that's not why we're here. We're here for an eternal existence. There was a boy who, this is in the 1800s, he was born with a large head. And he was now 10 years old. And his head was so large that he couldn't hold his head up anymore. And his parents were wealthy. They brought doctors in, and this kid turned just incorrigibly bad. He'd spit at the doctors, he'd bite the nurses, scream at them, and they had to go. They went through so many nurses and doctors that they couldn't keep them there anymore. So finally,
he probably was having headaches too.
Oh yeah, severe headaches. He was always in pain. Have I shared this before?
Yeah,
on the podcast.
I'm not sure. I don't know.
Okay, let's share it. So, get this picture. This kid's in bed. He's 10 years old. He's incorrigible, mean, nasty. And the parents hear about this unusual doctor, and he happens to be a Christian. And they bring him in. They tell him about what's going on. And first day he comes in there, he walks in the room and stays at the door and doesn't say anything to the kid. The kid's screaming at him, trying to spit at him, but he can't reach him because it's too far away. And the doctor bows his head, closes his eyes for about maybe a couple minutes, looks up, the kid's still screaming at him, walks out and told the parents that he'll be back next week. And they said, well, did you take his temperature? Did you check his pulse? Did you, what was the examination about? And he said, I'll give you my conclusions in a month. So he comes back the next week, does exactly the same thing. And the kid is screaming, spitting, etc. And the parents are like, well, can we know what you did in there? And he's going like, no, I'll give you my results in a month. Comes back the next week, does exactly the same thing. Only this time the kid is like, hey, aren't you going to take my temperature? You're going to feel my pulse? And the doctor now does the same thing. Only this time he says to the kid, no, I don't think I need to check your pulse or take your temperature, but I'll be back. And the kid's like, oh, no, wait, no. And the doctor, he said, I'll be back next week. And the kid's screaming like, no, you can't do that. And the doctor walks out. Comes back the fourth week, and this time the kid doesn't say anything. He's just watching the doctor. And the doctor closes his eyes, bows his head, prays for the kid, and then looks up, and now the kid's not screaming this time.
And well, does the kid know he's praying?
He asks him. He says, what are you doing when you close your eyes? And the doctor tells him what he's doing. He says, what do you mean praying? What does that mean? And the doctor explains what it means to pray. And he says, well, aren't you going to take my temperature and check my pulse? And the doctor said, well, I don't think I need to do that. And he said, I think that prayer is probably more important for you right now than me doing those other things. And the kid was like, well, don't leave yet. And then the doctor's like, well, what would you like me to do? He goes, just, can you get closer? And the doctor said, I can do that. And the doctor gets a little closer, and now he's by his bedside. The kid's not screaming, he's not spitting, not trying to bite. And the doctor tells him a little bit about God's design for his life. And the little boy is like, explain this God. What do you mean God? And he explains who God is. And he explains why God has allowed him to go through some suffering. And then he tells him about what God did for him and how he suffered ultimately.
Oh, wow.
So that this kid not only could have life now in a purpose, but have life everlasting with a new body. And so the kid is like, whoa, that's amazing. And you're like, how can I get this? And the doctor says, well, you need now to close your eyes and bow your head, and you need to pray. And so he leaves him like that. Comes back the next week, and the kid's like, I prayed, but, I just help me to understand more. And eventually the kid gets saved. And the doctor's able to disciple him, and the parents are still waiting for the report of the pulse and the temperature, but they've seen a change in their son, and they're like just mesmerized by what's going on. And so the doctor's discipling this kid, and the kid finally learns that his divine appointment on earth is to suffer patiently and joyfully. And the doctor tells him that if he's willing to do this, if he can live out his assignment by suffering joyfully, that he will be used of God to lead other people to Christ. And the little boy is like so excited to try it out. And so the doctor tells the family, I will no longer be coming. And they're like, no, please don't. You have to come. And the doctor says, no, you need to bring back the other doctors and nurses who came previously. And they're like, well, they'll never come. And the doctor says, I'll make sure that they come. The story, and this is a true story, reads out that this little boy led many of those nurses and doctors to Christ.
Wow.
Lived out his life, with purpose. And I think everyone has to realize that this 70 years plus or minus that God has given us is just it's an opportunity. It's an introduction into eternal life, how we're going to use that. And what Folly's doing here in chapter 9, verse 16, is she's trying to get people to not think about their purpose in life. They go on their way without any clue as to why they keep doing the same thing day after day. And if she can keep people like that, just keep people like without thinking about God, why have you made me? What is my destiny? What's my purpose? If people start asking those kinds of questions and asking God to really show them, He will. And Molly, the world can change. People can be so excited about their life. We should be able to wake up in the morning and be like, I can't wait to get started this day. That's the way life should be. Okay, that leads us to Folly's second trick. Verse 17. You want to read it?
Stolen water is sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant.
What's she doing?
She's trying to entice the simple with bread and water.
What kind of bread and water?
Stolen bread.
No.
Stolen water.
Yeah, stolen water.
And bread eaten in secret.
And how does this stolen water taste?
Oh, it is sweet.
Yeah, for a while. And then afterwards, it'll become bitter.
It is interesting. It's almost laughable. So Wisdom has been doing all these things. She's mixed fresh wine, and she has one step better than bread. She has slaughtered meat, and she's got like this whole feast. And then Folly's like, I got bread and water.
Yeah, she's an imposter. She's offering something similar, but it's not the same. Wisdom offers fresh baked bread and mixed wine. Folly can't offer the mixed wine. She offers stolen water that's sweet, temporarily sweet. What did Moses say in the book of Hebrews? The quote from Moses, that he did not want to enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season, because he knew that
sin is pleasurable for a season.
It is pleasurable for a season.
I think that's what can throw some people through a loop, especially someone who's simple, because then once you take that step forward, it's like, well, this isn't what I expected. I didn't think it was going to be. I thought it was like terrible, but it's not so bad. This isn't so bad at all. And then, not realizing that the consequences are so much worse. But I mean,
I know of two families, one unsaved family and one saved family, where there was adultery in both instances. And I'll never forget the unsaved family. I'll never forget the wife, sharing very plainly that she was glad she did it, and it ruined their family. And then the Christian family, and again, her husband had committed adultery. To pay him back, she committed adultery.
Ooh.
Yeah, and they ended up getting a divorce. And but I'll never forget her sharing, with the church, that she was amazed at how sin was pleasurable. That for the first several weeks it was incredibly pleasurable, and now, she looks back and she says, like, I can't believe that someone could be that blinded. She goes, it cost me everything. If there was any possibility of reconciliation, one party needs to be able to just hold on to God, and wait for God to deliver, because that's just kind of spiteful and vengeful, trying to get back at the person. So, what does Folly do? Stolen waters are sweet. Bread eaten in secret is pleasant. What does it mean, bread eaten in secret is pleasant? Simply, Folly is always offering something that's hidden, something that is enticing. You ready for this one? This is. Here, take this. Don't tell anybody. All of a sudden, it may seem innocent. Maybe you're in a work situation, and there's a coworker, and the coworker gives you something that he doesn't give anybody else, but he gives you something. It's like, don't tell anybody else. That's like hidden bread. That's like bread eaten in secret. When someone is offering something, what that does is that causes that person to feel valued more than anybody else, and those feelings start to stir up inside of us, because we're feeling like no one will know about this, and I'm being singled out as to be more valuable than someone else. And when people are living a life where they have so many holes in their heart already, they want it to be filled, that hidden secret bread does something. It initiates a
It talks about this. Inside of us, we have the flesh and the spirit. So God created us to be made in his image. We have all these good, beautiful desires inside of us. And then we also have the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life inside of us. So then, it's not really something that needs to be overthought because obviously we have a sin nature. Mm-hmm. And so we have these lusts inside of us waiting to be ignited. Mm-hmm. And so something like that happens. And take like the classic example. Don't look at that. What do you want to do? You want to look.
Yeah,
that's instantly that's ignited inside of us and we want the curiosity or whatever. And that's what Folly's doing here. She's taking something that's good and pure, like bread and water. They're like essential for life. They're sustenance. They're good things. And so it messes with the mind a little bit because it's like, well, come on, it's bread and water. Like, so what if it's stolen or sweet? Like, it's a good thing. It's very easy to, and we were talking about this a little bit ago. It's very easy to rationalize things because and God talks about this in his word, like the heart is deceitful, who can know it? Like, so it's very easy when you're in a compromising situation where maybe you have the unease or the little spark of conviction, like, I don't know if that's really good, but the mind is immediately on top of it. Like, hey, this is fine. Like it's just a little bit of bread or it's a little bit of water or like, it's just one text. They didn't mean anything by it. And it's okay if I respond or whatever it is. It's very easy to kind of justify that and then not realizing that you're taking one step closer, inching towards the thing until, we'll read about the consequences there.
I think the only way to really, quench that is that you really have to be in the Word. You have to be confessing your sins daily. You have to keep short sin accounts. It's the Christian life is a battle. We have to be on our guard at all times. There's no room for rest here other than, resting in worshiping God and enjoying God, but you've got to be on your guard at all time. You said something interesting about, it's just bread, it's just water, that folly can take, just what seems to be casual, innocent things and turn them into something that can be lethal. She's good at this. In life, like you said, it could be something that seems rather innocent, but then a person who's got a hole in their heart, a person who's vulnerable, they're in a dangerous place right there. And people that are filled with mischief, filled with folly, they see that vulnerable person. They go after the vulnerable person. And so you've got to be not only on guard, but we have to be on guard for other people in the church.
Whoa, that's convicting.
Yeah, because the Bible says, I think it was in chapter 6, it's either 5 or 6, it says that I was almost in all sin in the midst of the congregation. Think about that. That is probably the most dangerous place a Christian could be in life.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're involved in sin and they're rationalized it somehow. They're in church, they're in with other believers, they're enjoying fellowship, but no one knows what's going on deep inside of them. It's not confessed. It's a sin that's alive inside. And as a result of that, you become a target for Satan to destroy your life. The best way to not remain in that vulnerable state is to walk where? In the light. That's what protects us. Only the light protects us. If we stay in the darkness, then we stay vulnerable. And we become a target. Which brings us to the very last statement of folly. And now what's interesting too, I don't know if we said this earlier, in verse 16 it says, whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. Did we make that connection with what wisdom says above in verse 4, where wisdom and folly say exactly the same thing?
Yeah, in verse 16.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we said that on this.
Yeah, so if you go all the way to verse 4,
to illustrate this point, Mark is going to read verse 16, and I'm going to read verse 4.
Okay.
Ready?
Oh, no, I was going to read verse 4. You read verse 16.
You're going to read for wisdom?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be Folly.
Okay. It's not purposeful. It's only because I went to verse 4 already, and I'm there.
You're good. You're good.
Okay, you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, verse 4, wisdom speaks. Whoso is simple.
Verse 16, Folly speaks. Whoever is simple.
Verse 4, wisdom speaks again. Let him turn in hither.
Verse 16, Folly, let him turn and hear.
Verse 4, wisdom speaks and says, him that lacks understanding.
16, Folly, him who lacks understanding.
So she said to him.
She said to him.
Really? Molly, that's exact. So verse 4 and verse 16, wisdom and folly say exactly the same thing in their invitation.
It's crazy. They're addressing the same people, and they're both in the high places. They're both crying out, although wisdom is crying out and folly is being loud and obnoxious.
Wisdom's trying to take them out of the high place. Folly's trying to get them to stay.
Right, yeah. And then even the invitation, so wisdom offers them a seat at her table.
And eventually to know the Holy One. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and knowledge of the Holy One is true discernment. That's what that's the whole focus. The climax of chapter 9 is the centerpiece. Knowledge of the Holy One, true discernment. To know Jesus is everything, okay? But folly, her invitation, leads somewhere completely different. This is what it says in verse 18. As soon as the simple person takes folly's invitation to drink the sweet stolen waters and eat the bread in secret, it says this, he does not understand or does not know that the dead are there. That means that there are many others that have gone this way, that he's not aware that they're there. And it says this, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. And it ends just like that.
It's a terrible place to end.
Wisdom. Oh, no, it's an amazing place to end, Molly. God wanted these wisdom lessons to end with the word hell.
Yeah, okay, so let's take a look. Proverbs 7:27, her house is the way to hell, descending to the chambers of death. Chapter 8, verse 36, but he who sins against me wrongs his own soul. All those who hate me love death. Chapter 9:18, but he does not know that the dead are there, that her guests are in the depths of hell. The 3 chapters all end with the same exact thing.
Hell, hell, and hell. Many mighty are there. There are many dead there. The Father and God are making this amazing emphasis. Don't lose sight of this, son, that if you go in the way of folly, this is your end. Don't end there.
It's really fantastic that wisdom, it literally says that those who follow her will get life. So there's this very strong contrast between life and death.
And life in a way, like Jesus said, abundant life, but in Proverbs, there is no comparison to the life that wisdom is going to offer and give to them.
Not just, like you said, eternal life, but more abundant and free and rich life with purpose.
Here, now, and forever. And that purpose is what prepares us for the life to come.
Beautiful.
Molly, I'm excited. We're ready for the epilogue in chapter 10.
Let's do it. And then I'm so sad we're going to be done with our wisdom lessons for the podcast.
As it was said in Israel, Sababa.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the book could not contain all of the...
Or we end with excitement, excitement, excitement.
Excitements.
Okay.
We will see you guys next week.
God bless.
You've been listening to Fastened Like Nails, a presentation of Lamplighter Ministries. Our mission is to make ready a people prepared for the Lord by building Christ-like character, one story at a time. To learn more about our family collection of rare books, dramatic audios, or guild programs, visit lamplighter.net. To hear more podcasts, search for Fastened Like Nails wherever you listen to podcasts.
Get ready for a spiritual action-adventure story like no other.
Thou knowest the call. It is inscribed on thine heart.
An aged knight gives his last instructions to his beloved student.
Am I ready?
Fear nothing, only be strong and courageous.
But Sir Constance soon faces a treacherous sorcerer knight.
What seeks he? He seeks the king's city. And who has ever found it?
In the name of the king, I can do all!
Rise, Sir Constant, Knight of the Splendid Way.
Wilt thou surrender thy sword, or shall it be battle first?
Fool that I was!
Sir Knight of the Splendid Way on the next Lamplighter Theater.